I've always been the girl who rolls her eyes at the idea of mates, you know. Those old, school soulmates who were supposed to be your perfect match. But then, out of nowhere, he appears. He's got these electric blue eyes that seem to see right through me. And he's claiming I'm his mate. Talk about a plot twist. And just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, we were on our way to his castle. Chapter 1, meeting her mate Evelyn's key. "Oh, V," Mom said, "if you took the canoe, she's giving you up for adoption." Viga and I turned to look at her younger brother, who stood on the balcony above us. "What?" Brennan nodded, confirming she had heard him correctly. "Can I have your room if that happens?" "Sure," she said sarcastically. Vega turned to me and rolled her eyes before we continued our trek down the hill behind her family's cabin. He wasn't being serious, was he? Narrowly avoiding stepping on a loose rock. Vega asked nervously. He wasn't, but my mom might have been. We reached the small dock which looked out over the half-frozen blue lake. Walking across the old wooden boards took courage. "Are you sure we can't just talk in your room?" She shook her head, causing tight black coils of hair to poke out from under her beanie. She readjusted it as she loosened the dock rope from the cleat. "Not with those two brats running around. They've gotten on my nerves all day." "Hop in," she said, pointing to the canoe. I sighed as I steadied myself and lowered my body down into the canoe. She threw the rope to me and got in a little less carefully than I was comfortable with. "You're going to tip us over one of these days?" "To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐻𝐿 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Firmly grasping the sides, Vega said nothing as she picked up the oars from under our feet and handed me one. Once we had paddled out a few hundred feet, she seemed satisfied with our distance away from the dock and laid the oar across her lap. I did the same and looked at her expectantly. "So," I asked, "what did you want to tell me?" She chewed on her bottom lip nervously. "To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐻𝐿 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Prompting her along. "I'm going to break up with Sean," she said suddenly. I rolled my eyes and huffed. "This is what you brought me out here for. You've only been dating for 3 weeks. Why are you breaking up with him already?" Vega shrugged. "I don't know." I gave her a knowing look and she smiled. "I know you think it's stupid," she said, laughing as I rolled my eyes. "But I still believe there's a chance. Mates don't exist anymore," I said, shaking my head. Mates, a term used to refer to soulmates amongst lycanthropes, were around hundreds of years ago before interbreeding happened. Lycans hooked up with humans and their children hooked up with other humans until the entire population was more human than wolf. The entire bloodline thinned out so much it was impossible to have a mate as a modern day lycanthrope. "Don't be such a cynic," Vega said. "I think it could still happen. I heard it happened someplace in California last summer. Between 2 teenagers in the same pack there." I finished for her. "I know. You've told me that 1,000 times. Vega shook her head and leaned back. "I'm perfectly happy choosing the person I want to fall in love with." "Thank you. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐻𝐿 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "And how's that coming along there?" "To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐻𝐿 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I gave her a hard look and she smiled before shrugging. Vega began picking at the wooden Mars dents with her manicured nails. "I just think it would make our lives a whole lot easier if we were handed a husband," she said, laughing. "I might have actually passed my chemistry class last semester if I wasn't too worried about getting Sean to ask me out." I rolled my eyes. There's more to life than finding a boyfriend. Also, I can't think of too many people who did pass chemistry on the first try. "Whatever," she said, shrugging. "It's cold out here. Do you want to head back?" I nodded eagerly and grabbed my oar. I'd been shivering since we left the house. "Do vampires still exist?" Brennan asked. He was waiting for us in the doorway as we made our way across the patio and back into the house. "I don't know. You should ask Mom." Pushing past him and taking off her beanie. I thought that was Brennan. 𝐊𝐲 and I had been friends since the twins were born, but I still didn't know how she could tell Ethan from Brennan. They even dressed alike. "Mom, when is Dad going to be home?" 𝐊𝐲 called out, removing her jacket and hanging it on the hook beside the door. "He just called. The council had an urgent meeting called, so he had to close up the shop early and head into town, Mrs. Chandler yelled from the kitchen. "We're eating dinner in 5 minutes. Don't go too far." We both took our boots off and I followed 𝐊𝐲 into the kitchen. "Hi, Eddie. Are you staying for dinner? We're having chili," Mrs. Chandler informed me. "Yeah, sure. 𝐊𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐬𝐩𝐭𝐢𝐨𝐷 𝐊𝐢𝐃𝐝ⁱ𝐬𝐭𝐢𝐨𝐷. Giving her a hug. "You should text your mom and ask her if she would like to join us as well, since your dad is at the meeting too, Mrs. Chandler said, returning the hug. "There's no point. You know how she is about being out after dark. 𝐊𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐬𝐩𝐭𝐢�𝐷 𝐊𝐢𝐿𝐬𝐿𝐬𝐿𝐬𝐿𝐬𝐿𝐬𝐿𝐬𝐿𝐬𝐿𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐻𝐿 𝐿𝐢𝐻𝐿 Chandler just shrugged, something I had noticed her daughter did often as well when she didn't want to argue. What was the meeting for? 𝐊𝐢𝐳 asked, getting glasses and bowls out of the cabinet. Yeah, it seems a little weird for them to call a meeting on a Tuesday, I said as I began to fill the glasses with ice. Mrs. Chandler just nodded. I know. He didn't offer any information to me when he told me, so I thought it best. 𝐊𝐳's father, along with mine and 8 other men from town, were on Southern Utah's Council of lycanthrope affairs. The lycanthrope population was very small in Utah, and it was an hour's drive to each of the meetings, so there were never more than 3 or 4 of them a year. An emergency meeting was certain to raise some eyebrows. I don't think it's anything to worry about, Mrs. Chandler said when she noticed the 2 of us had gone quiet. She wiped her hands on a towel as she spoke. If there is a problem, it's likely just a political thing. I, on the other hand, wasn't so convinced, in judging by the look on 𝐊𝐳's face. She wasn't either. 2 hours later, we were all sitting on the couch watching sitcom reruns and talking about the upcoming semester. Are you ready to go back to school? Mrs. Chandler asked. I groaned. I can't tell you how many times I've thought about just taking classes online. The smell of that city alone makes me want to vomit. Even just thinking about it makes me sick. But you get used to it after a while, right? 𝐊𝐳 asked. I just cringed. Although lycanthropes are no longer pure-blooded enough for mates, we still inherit traits such as a heightened sense of smell. There were reasons most Lycans chose to live in extremely rural communities, and one of them being the stench of pollution that came with densely populated areas. As a girl who went off to college coming from a rural area, this was a serious shock factor. Eventually I became accustomed to the smell, but I knew going back after winter break would be a miserable transition. On the other hand, to classes online, so she had no clue just how bad it was. Well, I think that Mrs. Chandler's sentence was cut short when Mr. Chandler opened the front door. Body rigid, his presence made us all jump from our seats on the couch. What on earth is the matter? Mrs. Chandler asked, rushing over to him. He saw 𝐊𝐳 and pointed to us. You 2, come with me. He turned his attention to Mrs. Chandler. Lock the doors after us. We'll be back, Mrs. Chandler grabbed 𝐊𝐳's arm as we hurried past her and looked at Mr. Chandler. You're not taking my baby anywhere unless you tell me what's wrong. He rested his hand on her shoulder. We're going to be okay. Evelyn's father is waiting in the car. They're safe. 𝐊𝐳 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, 𝐿𝐢𝐳. He turned to 𝐊𝐳 and I. Come on, girls, Mrs. Chandler reluctantly let go of 𝐊𝐳 and watched us out the door. Warren Charles Chandler. If anything happens to either one of them, we are getting a divorce. We hurried out to the car where my father was waiting in the passenger seat, looking as stoic as ever. He was still in his suit, so I knew he had been staying late at the firm when the call came in. because he and Mr. Chandler didn't get along well at all. I knew there was something wrong if the two of them had willingly ridden in the same car. What happened? We'll discuss it in the car, Mr. Chandler said, opening the door for Vega and I to get in. As soon as he got into the driver's seat, the car was taking off backwards out the driveway. So Vega said, "Listen," Mr. Chandler said, "there are things that go on in packs today that you need to be aware of. You're the next generation of lycanthropes, and that means it is important you know how to handle situations when they arise. You are kind of scaring me. To my 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬. Nervously fidgeting with my seatbelt strap. An Alpha Superior is here tonight. He called a meeting with the council because one of our neighboring packs believes we are housing a defected member of their pack within our territory," my father said, speaking finely. "But housing a rogue is illegal," I argued. My dad nodded and caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "That's why this is very serious." "So where are we going?" Vega asked. "To meet him somewhere." "Yes, we are meeting the Alpha Superior and the leaders of the other pack in the valley," her father answered. "Alpha Superior?" Frowning. Why do they even still have those? Alphas haven't been used in pack dynamics in so long. They're our leadership, Mr. Chandler said. That entire echelon of lycanthropes still thrives with the alpha, beta pack mentality. It just seems so primitive. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬. Crossing my arms. They're just a bunch of old guys who can't let the glory days die. If I hadn't been looking out of my window when I said this, I would have seen Mr. Chandler smile at my naivety. I didn't yet know how wrong I was, but I would soon. We pulled into an empty parking lot between the base of the two mountains. "Where's everyone?" Vega asked. A few moments later, 3 cars pulled into the lot and parked next to ours. 7 men who I recognized from the town got out of the cars and came over to us. More than one of them eyed Vega and I suspiciously. "What are they doing here?" The one with cowboy boots asked. "Conflict resolution is an important lesson they need to learn," my father said. I rolled my eyes as soon as I heard his stupid attorney tone. Everyone always believed whatever came out of his mouth when he spoke like that. The rancher didn't look so convinced. "However, I don't think they should be party to this. It ain't appropriate to have ladies present when politics are being handled. It's a good thing you were out-asked then, isn't it?" my father asked, holding a stare that threatened the rancher to say another word against his. The rancher was obviously still bothered by our presence, but he didn't dare say another word as we began walking from the parking lot and onto a path that led into the surrounding forest. It was freezing cold outside in Vega, and I barely had time to grab our shoes and jackets before walking out the door, meaning our gloves and hats were left behind. I compensated by culling my long brown hair out of a ponytail to cover my ears and shoving my cold, pale hands deep into my pockets. Once we had reached a clearing in the trees, we saw a large group of men, very large men, I might add, waiting for us. One of them, however, was turned from us, standing in front of someone. They were speaking in hushed tones that even a lycanthrope's hearing like mine couldn't pick up on. You could very clearly tell who the foreigners were. They were all dressed in dark, regal clothing. The other men, clearly belonging to our neighboring pack, were in blue jeans and fur-lined denim jackets. "This isn't all of them," one of the older men from the neighboring pack yelled angrily. "Our apologies," Mr. Chandler said. "Not everyone could meet us here tonight on such short notice." The man who had his back turned to us stopped speaking and turned around to face Mr. Chandler and our group. His cropped blonde hair was all I noticed before my father stepped in front of me, blocking my view. Vega's father did the same to her, causing the both of us to shoot each other questioning looks. I need not explain how important this accusation brought against you is, so my alpha and I will not excuse the negligent behavior of your pack's council in this matter. It is not appropriate to degrade such an issue, someone said. I detected an accent in his voice, but I couldn't place it. I mouthed to Vega, shooting her a questioning look. She just shrugged, still listening. Everything went quiet. Deathly quiet. No one was speaking any longer. Silence was all anyone could hear. I looked at Vega. This can't be good, she mouthed. I heard a twig break under someone's foot about 2 feet in front of my father. Was there going to be an attack? Are they all going to start fighting? Then I heard his voice, deep and demanding. To my 𝐸𝐴𝐷𝐸𝐿 𝐷𝐸𝐿. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Was he speaking to my dad? My question was answered when my dad hesitantly stepped out of my way. The first thing I saw was a very broad and muscular chest beneath a black, long-sleeved shirt. The next thing I saw were his eyes, electric blue and gorgeous. They seemed to be glowing in the sparse moonlight that filtered in between the trees. It felt like something inside of me had caught fire. Holy shit, was the last thing I remember hearing Vega saying before everything went dark. Chapter to no choice, would you give her some room? My eyes snapped open at the sound of Vega's voice. She was standing over me with her hands on my shoulders. I grabbed her arms and stared at her wide-eyed. What happened? She rolled her eyes. You locked your knees, I guess. I thought homeboy over here was going to shit himself. I looked over in the direction she nodded and saw the blue-eyed alpha standing beside her, staring at me intently. Concern etched on his face. Oh my God, how long was I out? I whispered. There's no need to be dramatic. Only a minute or 2. She answered. My gaze returned to Vega and I squeezed her arms as I sat up. Dude, I think he's your mate. She finished. I guessed that with the way he just acted. Are you okay? I'm fine, I assured her. She made a face. You don't look fine. I am, I assured her as she helped pull me to my feet. Immediately, the alpha offered a strong arm behind my back to steady me on my feet. Are you all right? A strong English accent complemented his deep voice. I nodded, but kept my eyes on Vega. I couldn't look at him. She gave me a small smile and slowly peeled my arms away from her. Talk to him, she mouthed. Before I could muster a syllable, I heard my father's voice butt in. What is going on here? Get your hands off my daughter immediately, he demanded. Who do you think you are? I turned to look at him, but the alpha's arm only tightened around me as my father made advances toward us. He's my dad. Would you let go of me, please? Tugging at his arm. The alpha hesitated for a moment before loosening his hold on me enough for me to step away from him. Don't touch her again, my dad snapped, yanking me back by my arm. Whoa, mister, Chandler said, waving his hands and stepping between us. Scott, let go of Evelyn and let's talk this out. My dad glared at Mr. Chandler as he referred to him by his first name. The group went silent. All of us just stood there, staring at each other. I, in particular, could not stop staring at the alpha. God, he was gorgeous. Thick hair was perfectly messy and his electric blue eyes felt like they were looking straight through me. He had the most carnal facial features of anyone I had ever met, sharp and concentrated. He was also older than I was, merely 30. He caught my gaze and I looked away immediately. My attention refocused on the one standing behind him, the blonde one I had noticed earlier. He was almost as tall as the alpha and he carried a vaguely threatening expression. I blinked a few times before throwing my hands up in exasperation. I had no idea what to do. I didn't even believe mates were still a thing, much less know how to react to getting one. But I knew beyond a shadow of doubt that he was my mate. I just felt it. I couldn't yet determine, however, whether it was a good feeling or a dooming one. What is going on here? Can we please get back to what we were here to discuss? Someone shouted from behind the alpha. He and the blonde one turned around and we all pointed our attention to the man who had said it. That matter is no longer your concern, the alpha remarked. I'll handle things from here. This meeting is now adjourned. A group of furious shouts and murmurs came from the neighboring pack as this was spoken. However, They immediately went silent as the alpha narrowed his eyes at them. He turned his attention back to us. "Follow me," he said to my father and I before walking in between the 11 of us that were standing there. I looked at my dad before beginning to follow the alpha mister. Chandler and Vega also followed behind me, and soon my father did as well. I am absolutely stunned, confused, shocked, and scared all at the same time. I can barely keep up with any of this, Vega whispered as we walked. All I could do was nod in agreement. And to think, she added, you didn't even believe in mates 5 hours ago. She's right, I thought as I looked over at her. There was a flash of concern on her face. Are you okay? I'll let you know, I whispered. I took one look at the man walking in front of us and shook my head. I just don't see how this is going to end well, and that's scaring me. I could tell from her face that Vega was trying to formulate an encouraging word or two, but she wasn't able to and simply shrugged. Well, that's comforting. A few moments later, we came to a halt on the path and the alpha turned to look at us. He shot a hard look at Mr. Chandler, who immediately replied with, "My wife promises to divorce me if anything happened to her." I looked at Mr. Chandler as he said this and he gave me a wink. This seemed excusable enough to the alpha, who didn't make another reference to their presence. "My name is Alpha 𝐸, he said to my father, who only nodded in acknowledgement. He turned to me, "And Adam to you. Love, Evelyn. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐊𝐿𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Offering my hand, he took my hand and kissed the back of it. I had been going for a handshake there. Buddy, but okay. I wasn't looking at Vega, but I could see the stupid smile on her face without having to look at her. I knew her too well and she was probably about to wet her pants. "I am Vega Chandler, and this is my father, Warren Chandler," Vega said, stepping up and gesturing to herself and her father. "I mean it in the strictest confidence. You can assure me there is no rogue being housed on your land," Adam said, directing his words to my father and Mr. Chandler. Mr. Chandler nodded eagerly. "I absolutely certain there is no one being held here in 𝐿𝐿𝐿. No one knew anything of it when we spoke to the council. There isn't enough evidence to support their claim," my father said. I rolled my eyes at his judicial language. There are simply no signs of a rogue on this land. Adam didn't look so convinced by this. "I apologize for not being able to take your word for it. I will be leaving behind 3 men tomorrow who are going to investigate the claims further. They won't need more than a week." My dad looked irritated by this, but Mr. Chandler nodded thoughtfully. "I understand." Adam seemed pleased by this and reached out to shake Mr. Chandler's hand. "I appreciate your cooperation. We will be leaving tomorrow if there are no other setbacks. Now, I would like to speak to Evelyn. If you could excuse us." As my dad turned to leave, he reached out and pulled me in close by the front of my jacket. "Don't bother coming home tonight. I don't want that man stepping foot into my house. Do I make myself clear?" He snarled through clenched teeth. "To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐊𝐿𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I nodded, stiff with fear. As I said this, Adam slid his arm protectively between my father and I. "Let this be a warning," he said in a low voice. "If you ever lay your hands on her again, be prepared to have hands laid on you." My father backed away from the 2 of us, shooting daggers at both Adam and I as he did. "I like this guy," Vega whispered as she passed me. They had all walked away in a matter of seconds and I was more than aware I was now completely alone with this man. Thanks for that. Is that all you can say? You idiot. Does he treat you that way often?" Adam asked, moving in front of me. I didn't answer, not wishing to elaborate further on the topic of my father. "You said you're leaving tomorrow." Changing the subject, I saw a shadow of a smile appear on his face. "No, I said we were leaving tomorrow. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐊𝐿𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." 𝐿𝐻𝐿𝐬𝐩𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But you're not assuming I'll be going with you, are you? Adam's eyes narrowed, causing a lump to form in my throat. You wouldn't want to. I mean, I have school and stuff. I cringe. School and stuff. That's the best you could come up with. You don't even like school. Wait. What? You do? I asked incredulously. Yes, he said. I am wondering. However, if there is any way I can persuade you otherwise. You see, as much as you are internally trying to deny it, you and I are mates. This means, from my end, that I have a duty to both protect and provide for you. I cannot do that while you are here and I am there. As an alpha, I also have obligations to my people which I cannot abandon by staying here, so I am asking you to willingly come with me tomorrow when I leave. And if I don't come willingly, I ask slowly, you'll come involuntarily. As in, I'll pick you up and put you on the plane myself. Well, Dan, it's your choice. 𝐿𝐻𝐿𝐬𝐩𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Which method you prefer? 𝐿𝐻𝐿𝐬�10, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. This is unbelievable, I said, walking away. He began to follow me closely. Is that a yes? I haven't decided. I mumbled. Adam and I returned to our respective groups shortly, and everyone turned to stare at us as I walked over to Vega. Adam made his way over to the blonde man, who was standing alone and silently watching everyone else. What did he say to you? She asked excitedly. Kicking the dirt with my boots. He wants me to go home with him tomorrow. She gasped and smiled. Are you going too? I don't really have much of a choice. I groaned. She gasped. He's walking over here. I looked up from the ground to see him walking over to us, and Mr. Chandler spoke up. Alpha Superior 𝐿𝐻𝐿𝐬, if you need someplace to stay tonight, you are more than welcome to stay with my family and I. I have somewhere to stay. Thank you. 𝐿𝐻𝐿𝐬𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Adam said. He turned to me. Follow me. He began to walk away and I ran after him. Wait, I yelled. He stopped and turned to me. I'm not staying with you tonight. 𝐿𝐻𝐿𝐬𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Are you forgetting what your father told you? I took a deep breath. I'm staying with Vega. Before he could say anything, I continued. I need the time to say goodbye. He thought about it for a moment and nodded. I'll pick you up in the morning. I nodded and turned back to walk away. Evelyn. I looked back at him. Don't do anything stupid before then. 𝐿𝐻𝐿𝐬𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Adding a wink. The ride home was silent. I knew my dad was mad at me, but there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. It wasn't like I could help the fact that I had found a mate in a man who was an alpha superior and basically a king among our people. I tried not to think about that last part too hard. We dropped my dad back off at his firm. He said nothing as he slammed the door after he got out. I watched him stomp over to his car angrily as we pulled away. Are you okay back there? 𝐿𝐻𝐿𝐬𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Mr. Chandler asked. Yeah, I said softly. I'm fine. I caught his eye in the rearview mirror and caught his sympathetic gaze. Vega put her hand on my shoulder and smiled. Things are going to be better for you now. I just shook my head. I wasn't so sure about that. When we pulled into the Chandlers' driveway, Mrs. Chandler came running out in her dressing gown. You couldn't have at least called. Her hands on her hips. Mr. Chandler smiled. There isn't much service in the valley. Honey, besides, I think you needed to hear this in person. Why don't we make some tea for Vega and Evie? They need to warm up. She nodded and took Vega and I inside with her hands around our shoulders. We had all sat down next to the fireplace with steaming cups of tea before Mrs. Chandler began putting for ounces. What happened? Mr. Chandler looked at me. We met some, interesting people tonight. Don't you agree? 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Vega nudged me and wiggled her eyebrows. I just stared down into my cup of tea. I'm not getting it. Mrs. Chandler said, "What happened, Mr.?" Chandler began to tell her the story. When he got to the part where we met Adam, he stopped and looked at me and, "He's my mate. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I hated how good it felt to say that. Mrs. Chandler gasped and Mr. Chandler hushed her. "You're going to wake up the boys and it's almost midnight." She put her hand up to silence him, all the while still looking at me. "Darling, that's wonderful," she said, smiling. "Aren't you happy?" It was my turn to shrug. "I guess so. Liar. He's making me leave with him tomorrow. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Her smile fell. "Can't you ask him for more time? He has to get back to his pack," I said, shaking my head. "There really isn't a way out of this. I tried telling him I had school, but it didn't really work." "Well, you wanted to take classes online anyway," she reasoned, "although I don't appreciate how selfish he's being, taking you away from people who love you so suddenly and all. At least someone would miss me." As we headed to bed, I opened the door to the guest bedroom, a place I slept frequently. Vega stopped me from walking in. "Do you want to sleep downstairs in the living room like we used to?" Sure. We headed downstairs, made our sports on the couches, and lay down, watching the fired eye. "I'll miss you." "Finally. I'll miss you too. Do you think you'll ever come back?" I rolled over and stared up at the ceiling. "I certainly hope so. You have to come and visit me. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Wherever I end up going, I will," she assured me. "How do you think your mom took the news?" 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. There's no telling. It was quiet for a moment before she spoke again. "I have a feeling that things will be great for you with him." I swallowed hard. "I certainly hope so." Chapter 3. Leaving her family, Evie. I sighed and rolled over. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. "Wake up." "Why?" "He's here." I turned my head and opened one eye. "What? Who's here?" "Who do you think?" Vega asked, crossing her arms. Then I remembered her. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes. Throwing the blanket from over my legs, I sat up and swung my legs over the side of the couch. Vega sat down next to me. "Do you want to run upstairs and hide in my closet? I can tell him you left this morning and went home." I smiled and swung my arm around her shoulder. "Vega, if I thought that would work, I would be halfway up the staircase right now." She laughed. 𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐸𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. "Honey, I made breakfast. Adam just pulled into the driveway if you want to go invite him in to eat." Mrs. Chandler yelled from the kitchen. The doorbell rang a few moments later and Vega got up to go open the door. "You might want to run your fingers through your hair and go pop a breath mint really fast," she advised. Laughing, I looked at her wide-eyed. "I don't have on a bra either." I ran past her and up the stairs to her room. I quickly changed back into my sweater and jeans from the day before. I borrowed some deodorant and brushed my teeth quickly. I was walking back down the stairs, running my fingers through my hair, when I heard Adam's voice. "I appreciate that, Mrs. Chandler. We are a little short on time this morning. However, so we'll need to be going," he said politely. She had invited him to stay for breakfast. As if he sensed me standing there, Adam turned around and met my gaze. I slowly walked down the stairs and he greeted me at the bottom. "Good morning," he said softly. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. "We need to go ahead and leave. I'll be waiting just outside while you say goodbye." I nodded, not meeting his gaze. "It was nice to meet you," Adam said, shaking the hand of both Mr. and Mrs. Chandler. He gave me one last look before heading out the front door. They all turned to look at me and I smiled, trying to hold back tears. "Does your boyfriend play football?" Brennan asked. I laughed at this and shook my head. "I don't know. He should play basketball. Did you see how tall he is?" Ethan commented. "Hush," Mrs. Chandler said. "You two say goodbye to Evie now. We don't know when we'll see her again." The two of them walked up, their arms wrapping around my waist and faces pressing into my stomach. "We'll be home for our birthday. It's in February. You know," Ethan said. I laughed, hugging them back. "I'll try to be." They both ran up the stairs behind me. I looked at Mrs. Chandler, who was crying. I couldn't help but cry myself as I walked over to her and threw my arms around her neck. "I'll miss you so much," I whispered. "I'll miss you too, honey." Pulling away. "You tell that man of yours that he has to take good care of you. You hear?" I nodded. "I will, Mr. Chandler walked over and gave me a side hug and a kiss on top of my head. "I'll beat him up if he doesn't," he said, laughing. I wiped tears from my cheeks and smiled. "I know you will." I looked at Vega, who was far from smiling. "I can't believe you're actually leaving." "I don't want you to go." I shook my head. "Me neither." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Going in for a big hug. Vega hugged me tight and I hugged her tighter. I felt her sigh as she let go and backed away. "You should get going then." I nodded. "I'll call as soon as I get wherever it is I'm going." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. "Here, Mrs. Chandler said, handing me my coat and scarf as well as a brown paper bag. "I packed you to some food for the road." "Thank you." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Taking the bag and hugging her again, I put on my jacket and backed away towards the door, trying not to cry again. "I'll see you guys soon." Mrs. Chandler nodded and Vega. Chandler waved. I stepped out the door and felt the icy breeze hit my wet cheeks. I wiped them quickly with my sleeve and wrapped my scarf around my neck. He was standing there with his hands in his pockets as if the cold air didn't bother him. I walked past him and down the sidewalk. A black, all-terrain Jeep was sitting in the driveway that assumed was his. I walked around the car and put my hand on the handle. Before I could pull the door open, his hand blocked the door from opening. "I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. Didn't even turn around to look at him as his hand wrapped around mine and pulled the door open for me to get inside. The car was warm. He'd left it running with the warm air on full blast. I put my hands in front of the vents as he got into the car and closed the door. While we were pulling away, I wondered how he knew where the Chandlers live. "How did you know where to find me?" Still not looking at him, he answered simply. It didn't really satisfy my question fully, but I didn't have the desire to ask it twice. "So where am I going so that we can get your things?" Adam asked. "My house is farther up the road that way," I said, pointing in the direction we were heading. A few silent minutes later, we pulled in front of my house. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He parked and turned the car off while I got out and headed up the drive. As I was walking up, I pulled my key out of my back pocket. "What time is it?" I asked Adam, who had caught up with me. He looked at his watch. "Just after 8, he replied. "They aren't awake yet." "Be quiet," I instructed as I unlocked the front door. Adam didn't say anything, only followed me inside as I opened the door slowly. My dad was passed out on the recliner, a near-empty whiskey bottle tucked underneath his arm. I pretended like Adam couldn't see it too. As we made our way down the hallway and into my room, I tried to ignore Adam staring at the door, less frame. The door to my bathroom had also been taken off the hinges, something he noticed as well. His jaw clenched as his hand traced the broken hinges. I pretended not to notice him as I looked into my closet and I stared at all the things I had to pack. I turned around and saw Adam walking around my room, taking in the sight of a place I never stayed. I knew he could tell I never stayed here too. There was dust on top of the dresser and on the nightstand. The bed hadn't been made in months, so there was probably a layer of dust on that too. "I'm going to go get boxes. I'll be right back," I whispered. He turned to look at me. "Do you need help?" "Stay in here," I said, shaking my head. As I walked out of my room, I remembered the 2 large plastic containers that Mom stored all her post-surgery clothes in. They're in her closet. I opened the door to her bedroom slowly. I knew she was in the bed because the blackout curtains were drawn over the windows, making it impossible for any light to shine into the room. I knew where the closet door was, however, and made my way over to it with my hands outstretched to keep me from running into anything. "This room smells wretched," I thought as I grabbed the closet door handle. I opened the closet and sunk to my knees to grab the containers from under her clothes. I slid them out slowly, opened the lids, and dumped all the clothes out. Add those to the list of crap that's strewn all over the floor. I didn't have an ounce of remorse for doing it either. I stacked the empty boxes and slid them out of the room, shutting the door behind me. I made it back into my room quickly and quietly and put the boxes in front of my bed. Adam was sat in my desk chair. "Do you want me to start pulling stuff out of these drawers and putting them in the boxes?" "There's nothing in there but a few books," I said, going to my closet. "You can put them in here." I threw him a duffel bag as he began to empty out the drawers. I began to haul everything from off the racks into the boxes, not even bothering to fold them or take them off the hangers. Once I was done with that, I packed my underwear into a bag and put them in with all of my clothes. 1 box down, 1 more to go. I looked over to Adam and saw him flipping through the pages of a notebook. "What is that?" Before he could answer, I heard heavy footfalls coming down the hallway. The last thing I saw was my father before Adam was standing in front of me, followed by the sound of shattering glass. It took me a moment to process what had happened, but when I saw the grimace on his face as he looked down at me and the whiskey dripping down the side of his face, I gasped. Adam turned around to face my father and I saw the shards of glass sticking out of his jacket. The shattered remains of the whiskey bottle was laying on the floor. "He threw that at you. I told you not to bring this man into my house. Do you not listen to a word I say?" my father bellowed. Adam took a large step forward. "Clearly, it runs in the family," he said with a clenched jaw and closed fists. "Wait," I yelled, jumping in between the 2 of them. I looked at my dad. "I just need an hour," I bargained. "1 hour and I'll be gone, and I won't come back. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐊𝐿𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I swallowed as he glared down at me. "You have 30 minutes. My dad turned to walk down the hallway and I put my hand on Adam's chest to stop him from following him. "Stop. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐊𝐿𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Pushing against him. "Do you not know what he just did?" he asked incredulously. This was the first time I saw him close to his core. "I did. Trust me. I know all too well. But we need to focus on what we're doing here and just hurry up and finish so we can leave. Are you okay?" Adam took a deep breath and nodded. I'm fine. But if he tries something like that one more time, I'm not letting him get away with it. I swallowed and nodded. Deal. His jaw clenched before he walked back into the room, kicking the broken bottle under the bed. What do you have left to do? Just finish packing this box and we'll be good to go. 𝐿𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐿 𝐻𝐼𝐴𝐻𝐿. Adam sighed before putting the bag of books inside the box. I threw in my shoes. I packed my laptop into my backpack and put that in the box as well. I don't think we'll be able to fit anything else. Well, I suppose that's as good as it will get then, I said while putting the lid on top. I looked around the room. It was packed up for the most part. I had everything that I needed. I did wonder, however, what they would do with everything else when I was gone. You'll need an overnight bag, Adam said. I walked back inside the closet and pulled out the last bag I had. It was a reusable grocery bag, but it would have to work. I packed it quickly. Evelyn. I jumped when I heard my father's voice boom across the house. Our 30 minutes was up. I saw Adam's jaw clench as he glared down the hallway. Hey, I said, waving at him. Let's just get everything and go. He looked at me and I could tell there was definitely an internal debate going on inside of him. Let's go, I repeated. I leaned down to pick up the stacked containers and Adam simply picked them both up and turned to walk down the hallway. Well done. He made it look easy. I grabbed my overnight bag and my jacket and scarf before following him.
He put the boxes in the car and came back inside as I stood in the foyer,
awkwardly standing next to my father, whom I was convinced was still half drunk. You're leaving now. I nodded, turning to him. I expected a goodbye or something, but he simply turned and walked away. The disappointment was clearly seen on my face by Adam. He walked up to me. Go get the car started. I'll be out in a second. Adam, I'm not asking you. His jaw clenching. I decided it best not to argue with him on this, and I slowly walked toward the front door. Adam stood still, watching me. I stopped when I reached the door. Go, he said. Before I could say a word, I opened the door before I could think twice about it, and I walked quickly out to the car. I started it up and waited for Adam to come back out. The air vents had just started blowing warm air when I saw him walk out the front door. What did you say? I asked him as he got in. I didn't say anything, he said as he started to back the car out of the driveway. Buckle up. I swallowed as I pulled the strap across my chest. That was a bit uncalled for, I muttered. Adam hit the brakes and turned to look at me. You don't deserve to be treated like that. No one who claims to love you should ever speak to you or act towards you like he did. One day I'll make you see that. I looked away and he continued to back out of the driveway. I stared back at the house that I had lived in my entire life, and I honestly didn't care if I ever saw it again. So, where are we going? To get on a plane? Adam said shortly. Where is the plane taking us? Home. I rolled my eyes. Where is that? Adam just smiled. I hope you didn't think it was too cold here. Chapter for home Canada. I sat in the car seat with my jaw gaping open. I didn't pack warm enough for this. I groaned. I won't let you freeze, Adam said plainly. I shook my head. I thought we would be going somewhere like London. 𝐿𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐴𝐻𝐿. London? He asked incredulously. Why on earth would you have thought London? I just looked at him. I was raised by English parents. However, I have only been to London 3 times in my entire life. The smell of that place would put anyone out for hours. Evelyn. You don't have to call me Evelyn. 𝐿𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐿. I prefer the or Eve. Adam nodded. Well, Evie or Eve. We have another few hours in this vehicle if you feel like sharing anything else I might need to know. What do you want to know? Well, he said, thinking. What do I need to know? My birthday is February 22nd and my middle name is Michelle. I answered you. My birthday is May 6th and my favorite color is black. It goes with everything, he explained defensively. I shook my head. What is your favorite movie? I don't watch any. Weird, I commented. Favorite book? 𝐶𝐵 𝐿 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The Art of War by 𝐶𝐮𝐬. I just stared at him. What? I liked you better before I knew all this about you. 𝐶𝐵 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Well then, please enlighten me. What is your favorite film and book? Favorite film is Gone with the Wind. Favorite book is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I half expected the gush romance part, but not the lack of happy endings. Adam said. Lack of happy endings? I asked, says the man whose favorite book is The Art of War. I see your point. I leaned forward and pulled out the bag of breakfast that Mrs. Chandler had sent us. Hungry. Starving. I opened the bag and pulled out a few pieces of bacon and handed them to Adam. 𝐶𝐵 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Eating my own bacon. Why don't you watch movies? There are much more important things to do when you lead a pack of nearly 20,000. But don't you have leaders and councils who deal with your pack for you? I have advisors and a cabinet who help me. But no, I do most of it myself. So it's like a dictatorship. Adam looked at me. Is that what you think of alphas as? Dictators? I think the whole alpha, beta thing is a bit far-fetched. I mean, I thought Lycans got past the primitive mindset ages ago. I saw his jaw tense. It's the most effective means of pack safety and harmony ever used. The rules I enforce and lifestyle I promote are for the good of the pack. I don't see how that is primitive.
That sounds like something a dictator would say.
𝐶𝐵 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I could have sworn he rolled his eyes. What about you then? I suppose you probably think that just letting everyone do as they please and roam about as they would is the best thing for a pack. I nodded. That's a very modern approach. And promise you, as someone who travels and sees the effects of a mindset, that it's rudely ineffective. Adam argued. It's worked just fine for me. 𝐶𝐵 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Adam simply replied, Then you're in for a rude awakening. Is he serious? So let me get this straight. 𝐶𝐵 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You're going to drag me away from my family and friends because I'm your mate, which you seem to believe gives you some kind of ownership rights over me, and criticize me for believing in a system of order that has kept me alive my whole life. After which you plan on taking me to an unfamiliar place where I have to completely readjust. You being the only person I know. All that being said, I would dare say I've been rudely awake and already. Evelyn, Adam said slowly, out of respect for my title. I suggest you watch the words that come out of your mouth when they are directed at me. Fuck off. The car came to a screeching halt in the middle of the empty highway. I could feel the rage seeping off of him, but I kept my eyes forward on the road. These pleasantries you've grown accustomed to in me are not, by any means, my nature. The last time those words were spoken towards me, the wolf's head ended up 15 feet from his hide. I kept my head straight, eyes focused forward. Look at me, Adam said. My jaw clenched, but I didn't look at him. I felt his hand grab my jaw gently, his fingers turning me to face him. I glared at him hard as his blue eyes studied mine. Adam dropped his hand and put his eyes back on the road. The car started moving again. Adam not saying another word. We didn't speak again for several more hours until the car pulled off the deserted road onto a path towards a small runway. A steel bunker sat hidden in the trees. A small aircraft was parked outside it on an outstretched runway. As we pulled into the lot, I noticed a few other cars were parked there. Adam said nothing as he parked the car and got out. Do I just sit here? I watched as Adam walked over to the other vehicles. All of them black Jeeps like his. The blonde man got out of the driver's side of the Jeep and walked over to Adam. After a short conversation, Adam turned and started to walk back to me. I turned my head and pretended to not have been watching. My door opened, Adam reached over and unbuckled my seatbelt. Get out. We're leaving. I stared at him. I can unbuckle myself. Thank you. I got out of the car and stomped around to the back of the Jeep to retrieve my things. I don't appreciate the attitude. Adam said. Following me. Say it again. Maybe that will stop me from giving it to you. I muttered as I opened the trunk and began to pull out my things. Stop. He grabbed the boxes from me and began to carry them towards the small airport. I closed the trunk and grabbed my jacket and scarf from the front seat. Putting them on. I followed him. At this point, passengers had begun to unload out of the other Jeeps and bags were being thrown around like sacks of flour as the trunks were being unloaded. I was a few feet behind Adam when the blonde man approached me from one of the Jeeps. I am 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐬𝐬, but you can call me Jace. Noted, I replied, passing him. I got a few feet away before I stopped and took a deep breath. I turned around and walked back to him. That was rude. I'm sorry. I apologized. I'm Evelyn Schubert. But you can call me Evie. Jace smiled and offered his hand for me to shake. Nice to meet you. You're not British. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Detecting a different accent. RC. Smiling. I was assigned to the big guy over there 2 years ago. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I asked. Evelyn. I turned around to see Adam standing almost 30 feet away on the pavement. He had handed my things off to someone else and was motioning to follow him. I turned to look at Jace, who was still smiling. Nice to meet you. You as well, was all he said as I walked away. I walked over to Adam. What? Get on the plane. We're about to leave. He turned to walk away, but I stood still. When he turned around and saw me, he walked over, stopping just in front of me. I wasn't lying when I said that I would lift you over my shoulders and put you on this plane myself if I had to. I rolled my eyes. I don't want to go to Canada, and I didn't want to come to America to deal with your pack. But look where it's gotten me. Now if you don't walk your ass over and onto that plane, I'll do it for you. Adam turned to walk away. He's not lying, Jay said, walking around me from behind. I know, I muttered, reluctantly following him. I followed Jace as he walked over the plane and up the steps into it. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It looked like something I would have expected a private jet to look like. It was nice, but smaller than a commercial airplane. I took a seat in a chair by one of the windows in the back. It was a single chair next to the aisle, so there was no way Adam could sit next to me. I didn't know how long this trip would be, but I didn't want to deal with him for even a minute longer. Propping my elbow on the windowsill, I leaned my head on my hand and closed my eyes. I want to go back to Vegas' house. I wish I never stayed for supper last night with the Chandlers and that I never went with Mr. Chandler to the valley. I opened my eyes when something fell at my feet. I looked down to see my overnight bag laying at my feet and Adam standing over it. I refused to make eye contact with him as I pulled the bag from the floor and sat it in my lap. Adam sat in the chair in front of me, and I glared at the back of his head until I heard the plane engine start. Everyone else loaded on quickly. There were probably 20 of us on the plane, which felt a little crowded. Jace sat in the front near the door and began to write something down on a notepad he took out of his backpack. My nosy side wanted to see what it was he was writing, but no matter how hard I strained my eyes, I couldn't tell. I leaned back in my seat as the door closed. The plane began to move shortly thereafter. I huffed and shook my head as we gained speed down the runway, eventually leaving the ground. No one was speaking. It was complete silence in the cabin. This made it difficult to cover up the sniffles that came from me as I tried not to cry. Suck it up, girlfriend, I told myself. There was nothing I could do about it. Therefore there was no reason to be crying over it. I don't remember how long the plane ride was. I eventually fell asleep against the window. When I woke up, it was dark out and the lights in the cabin had been dimmed. Adam was awake and out of his seat. He and Jace stood in the front of the plane, discussing something. I looked around at the other men who were on board as well. Some were asleep. Some had headphones on. Others sat talking in the dimly lit cabin. Adam must have seen me looking around because he ended his conversation with Jace and walked over to me. The plane will be landing shortly. Make sure you have all of your things. His voice just above a whisper. As he walked away, I turned and looked out the window. I could see some lights off in the distance, the airport I guessed, but there were none around us besides those. How deep into Canada did we go? A few minutes later, my guess was confirmed when the plane began to descend towards the brightly lit runway. Once the plane had landed, the lights in the cabin turned on and everyone stood up and prepared to leave the plane. Adam stayed close by as we all exited out onto the tarmac. The wind was whipping around me violently, almost knocking me over. It didn't seem to bother anyone else, but I did wonder how the plane hadn't been blown out of the sky. The runway had been cleared, but at the edge of the pavement I could see a thick blanket of snow covered the ground. I couldn't see anything beyond that, just the inky blackness of the night. I followed the group with Adam by my side to the large SUVs that sit near the terminal, where our luggage was being loaded by the airport attendants. There were plows on the front with blinding light bars over the windshield. As we got closer, I also noted the chains wrapped around the tires that would help us keep traction on the icy roads. Great. How much longer is this going to take? I asked Jace, who happened to be walking in front of me. All I heard was the groan up equivalent to, "Are we there yet?" Opening up the car door for me, I groaned and slid into the warm car. It was significantly colder here than it was in Utah. Another reason I wish I could have stayed. Jace hopped into the passenger seat and Adam into the driver's seat. Everyone else piled into the other 3 identical SUVs. So, how long? Only about an hour. Then we're home, Adam said, culling off the tarmac and onto a dirt road that had been cleared of snow. Then you're home, I muttered, looking out the window. There was nothing to see, just the night sky which was littered with stars I never could see at home. I soon became bored with that though. Can someone turn on the radio? There's no radio signal out here, Jace said with a chuckle. I groaned. After enjoying another hour or so of the boring ride, I began to notice the lights in front of us. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐾𝐮𝐧𝐬 enthusiasm. It was about damn time I saw some form of civilization. As we got closer, I began to feel some type of gratification as I realized it was a village. However, once we were there, I realized it wasn't what I expected. Where are we? I asked incredulously. Neither one of them answered. All I could do was stare out the window at the village we were now driving the streets of. There were shops and cafes as well as apartments and bookstores. It all looked like something from a movie. It was beautiful. We kept driving much to my dismay until we were almost out of the city completely. I kept trying to get a good look at where we were heading, but with all the twists and turns on the tiny, cobblestone streets I was beginning to feel nauseous. I leaned back and closed my eyes, counting to 50 and back down again to prevent death by boredom. The car slowed and then stopped and my eyes opened. We're home, Jay said, a mischievous smile on his face. My eyebrows furrowed until I stepped out of the car. I could have screamed, but with a name like Alpha Superior, Adam 𝐷𝐸𝐻, I should have guessed it. He lives in Am Castle.